Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on navigating enzymes, choosing the right product for FODMAP intolerant patients. I'm Jocelyn Wells, a registered dietitian with a specialty in gastrointestinal nutrition, and it's a pleasure to share with you on this topic today. Here are my disclosures. Today, we'll review FODMAPs, the foods they're commonly found in, and how they can trigger GI symptoms. I'll provide some additional background on how digestive enzymes break down and improve FODMAP tolerances. And I'll share how FODMAP targeting enzymes can support symptom management and diet liberalization for anyone who is FODMAP sensitive. To set the scene, I want to remind us all how truly complex functional GI disorders are. There are many factors at play, from motility issues to hypersensitivity, to altered immune function and altered gut microbiota composition, which we also call dysbiosis. So what we also know is that about 3/4 of patients with IBS are sensitive to FODMAPs. So while managing FODMAP intake is rarely the only intervention necessary to fully help control IBS, it is a commonly effective one. And as a brief review, FODMAPs is an acronym to describe short-chain carbohydrates that are poorly digested or absorbed by the gut. These carbohydrates are instead either fermented by gut bacteria or draw water into the digestive tract. For those who are sensitive to FODMAPs, this fermentation and excessive water in the digestive tract can lead to common GI issues like gas, bloating, constipation, and diarrhea when the FODMAPs actually reach the lower half of the digestive system. So also of note is that FODMAP-related symptoms generally occur 4 to 8 hours after the FODMAP-containing food is eaten, because it takes time for the FODMAPs to reach the second half of the digestive tract. I highlight this point because this timing can actually be a really helpful clue to parse out what your unique digestive triggers might be. If you find yourself rushing to the bathroom, say 20 to 30 minutes after a meal, that's a helpful indicator that FODMAPs are likely not the culprit. However, if symptoms occur late at night, maybe 4 hours after dinner, that can be a really strong sign to probe further into this hypothesis that there might be a FODMAP sensitivity at play. When it comes to managing FODMAP intolerances, the low FODMAP diet is a highly effective tool. This is a 3-phased approach to learn your individualized FODMAP triggers and the amounts that you tolerate. It also includes adding back in the FODMAPs that are not found to be troublesome. However, this low FODMAP diet can also be very restrictive, especially if too few foods end up being added back into your diet. And so this excessive restriction has risks. If not implemented properly, a low FODMAP diet can be low in fiber and particularly low in prebiotic fiber. An overly restrictive diet can also contribute to nutrient deficiencies. And then psychologically, following a restrictive diet can be socially isolating and create anxiety and even sometimes fear around food. Plus, on top of that, low FODMAP foods at the grocery store and low FODMAP modifications at restaurants can be really costly. Low FODMAP alternatives can actually be 2 to 3 times as expensive as their, non-low FODMAP counterparts. So then on top of this, FODMAPs are just about everywhere in the foods we eat. Not only are they prevalent in our diets, they're also found in many nutritious, really high fiber foods. This makes FODMAPs incredibly hard to avoid when you're building a balanced diet. So many whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and dairy products contain FODMAPs. Plus, some FODMAPs, like the fructan and the GOS category, are prebiotic fibers, and these support growth of healthy gut bacteria, so that microbiome. This all makes following a low FODMAP diet really notoriously hard long-term. So, in short, there's nothing actually inherently bad about FODMAPs. And in fact, FODMAPs and the foods they're found in can provide a lot of health benefits. In those who are FODMAP sensitive, also know that FODMAPs actually don't cause any permanent damage or harm to the digestive tract. The issue is really just that in those with FODMAP intolerances, these FODMAP-containing foods cause digestive discomfort. So in reality, We want to help everyone enjoy the benefits of FODMAP-containing foods, whether that's the nutritional value of the foods they're in, their prebiotic benefits, or simply the gastronomical and social pleasures of a FODMAP-containing meal. So then the question becomes, how can we improve tolerance to FODMAPs so that those who are sensitive can enjoy them in greater amounts? And this leads me to our next topic of today, digestive enzymes. So enzymes are highly specialized proteins, so chains of amino acids that are folded in highly particular ways. Digestive enzymes are a specific type of enzymes, can act on troublesome foods, such as FODMAPs, with the purpose of breaking them down into smaller carbohydrates. Here are just some examples of digestive enzymes that can target various types of carbohydrates, many of these which are FODMAPs themselves. And so when it comes to our focus today, FODMAP targeting digestive enzymes, there's a couple points to know. Remember that the purpose of digestive enzymes is to help break down FODMAP content in foods before these FODMAPs can trigger digestive symptoms when they reach the lower half of the digestive tract. I use the analogy that digestive enzymes act as specialized kind of molecular scissors to break down FODMAP molecules, which makes them easier to digest. This analogy to molecular scissors can be a really helpful way to just conceptualize how digestive enzymes help improve tolerance to FODMAPs. So a few examples of FODMAP targeting enzymes include lactase, alpha-galactosidase, and fructan hydrolase. I'll get into each of these enzymes in further detail soon, but just before that, it's helpful to know that the body produces some enzymes itself, though not all. So in the case of FODMAPs, with the exception of lactose, and lactase, which would target it, the body does not produce enzymes that break down FODMAPs. Instead, what actually happens is that the gut bacteria help out in metabolism of many kinds of carbohydrates, and particularly FODMAPs. So when dysbiosis is present, so again, that gut microbiota are off for any number of reasons, certain FODMAP intolerances can develop. And this helps explain, in part, why FODMAP tolerance levels vary so greatly. Everyone's gut bacteria are very different. So this brings us to the question of who can benefit from digestive enzymes. And really, at a high level, anyone with sensitivities to FODMAPs can benefit from using digestive enzymes. You don't need a clinical diagnosis of any kind. If you're sensitive to FODMAPs, enzymes can help improve tolerance to those foods. And because enzymes are simply proteins, as we discussed, they're a highly safe, low-risk option to manage FODMAP-related GI issues. In particular, if you're someone who might already be on a restrictive diet for another condition, like maybe IBD or celiac, and a low FODMAP diet might limit your food options too much, digestive enzymes can be especially helpful. On top of that, anyone with a history of disordered eating where a low FODMAP diet might be too restrictive can also benefit from enzymes. And then beyond that, if you're unlikely to implement a low FODMAP diet well, or simply uninterested in it, digestive enzymes can be a great tool to manage FODMAP issues without needing to make dietary changes. And when it comes to figuring out the best FODMAP targeting enzyme for you, there are a couple questions to consider. I'm often asked what enzyme activity is and what is the relationship between enzyme activity units and FODMAP breakdown. And scientifically speaking, enzyme activity refers to the rate at which a specific enzyme causes a reaction to happen. So there are several factors that can influence enzyme activity. These include, temperature, pH, time, how the enzyme was prepared, the presence of other substances, and the mode of administration of the enzyme. So enzyme activity units are also actually specific to their target. So for example, enzymes that target the GOS group of FODMAPs are measured in galactosidase units, or GALUs, while those targeting, say, lactose are quantified in acid lactase units, or ALUs. However, not all enzymes actually have a globally established standard activity unit. So in these cases, you can kind of reference research on a particular product or enzyme to learn a bit about the efficacy of that particular enzyme and its ability to break down the FODMAP it targets when there isn't an established unit to measure it. And so enzyme activity units provide kind of one method of assessing how digestive enzymes theoretically help break down FODMAPs, but they can be a quite unreliable metric just due to these differences in measurement conditions and variations in how the enzymes actually ultimately get applied to use and food in their practice. So, for example, when we get into this question of mode of administration, this is arguably equally, if not more important than enzyme activity. I know it can be kind of confusing to decide and figure out, whether a powder, a capsule, or a pill form of an enzyme is best when you're choosing a product to start trying. And so, kind of to understand why mode of administration is so important, it can be helpful to return to that, mechanism behind how enzymes are actually acting to break down FODMAPs. So remember that the digestive enzymes are acting on the food and not the body. This means that they can have the most impact when, there is maximum contact between the enzymes and the food. When enzymes are administered as a powder or applied directly on food before it's eaten, we create a scenario where there's this maximum kind of homogenization or contact between the enzymes and the FODMAP containing food. So then as the food and enzymes are chewed and they get mixed in the stomach, this FODMAP breakdown continues. When enzymes are actually, consumed in the form of a capsule or a pill, this ends up separating the enzymes from the food they're meant to break down. So these enzymes in capsules can be, deactivated in the stomach even before they have the chance to act on the food. So for, anyone who's familiar with prescription enzymes, I also want to just mention kind of a few differences here. When it comes to over-the-counter digestive enzymes that would be targeting FODMAPs, these favor a slightly acidic environment of the stomach and work best in a lower pH. This is quite different from prescription enzymes, which are encapsulated to actually delay their release until they reach the small intestine, which is where they're designed to act. And, if we think in even slightly more detail here, a kind of fun fact is that FODMAP targeting digestive enzymes can begin work as soon as they come in contact with the food, including even before the food is consumed. So, for example, as long as, they can be freely distributed in the food, a fructan or a lactose or even a GLS targeting enzyme can be mixed into a dish like a hummus or a milkshake or like a marinara sauce or even a garlicky pesto or tzatziki. Where this gets a little tricky is when there's a dish where homogenization is not actually possible. So maybe a slice of pizza or a sandwich. In these scenarios, we would want the enzymes to be consumed with the meal so that through chewing and as the food and enzymes pass through the digestive tract, this homogenization happens. So there's certainly, a lot of nuance here, but I still like to kind of share this idea of, quote, incubating the food with enzymes, just in case, anyone's interested to try it. And, with any of the foods I mentioned here that are kind of a smooth or pureed texture, it can be an option. And so kind of just in summary and to wrap up things about, how to choose an effective digestive enzyme, first, you always want to look for a formula that's going to target your known or your suspected triggers. So if you have multiple FODMAP intolerances, you can also benefit from using a combination enzyme that contains a blend of multiple digestive enzymes. What you want to kind of be wary of are these generic enzyme supplement blends that inflate their formula maybe with, enzymes that are targeting something that really is a non-trigger. So this often means that they're also more likely to, contain fewer of the enzymes that you actually need in a less than a therapeutic dose. When it also comes to over-the-counter digestive enzymes, what you want to look for is a formula, and a form that allows for that maximum contact between the enzymes and their FODMAP targets. So remember how, encapsulation can reduce this overall question of efficacy by actually preventing that optimal contact between the enzymes and the food that they're targeting. Another thing to look for is a clean label, just to make sure that there are no other gut triggers. You want to avoid supplements that have ingredients like mannitol, sorbitol, lactose, carrageenan, emulsifiers, or any other kind of artificial sweeteners, which can actually trigger symptoms themselves. And then lastly, look for a formula that has scientific backing. Products that have peer-reviewed research on the product itself are your best option. Avoid those that are simply just citing background information on potential mechanisms, or, have studies that, might not even have, scientific or peer-reviewed data to support them. And so here, let's just kind of briefly get into each enzyme specifically and some of the common foods that contain each FODMAP that they target. So first, lactase is the enzyme that targets lactose. As I mentioned, lactase is the one enzyme that the body does produce, though sometimes, its production is not enough to fully address the amount of lactose in the diet. So extra lactase can be taken to support just overall better tolerance to foods like, a cheese, milk, ice cream, yogurt, or any other kind of lactose-containing food. The recommended amount of lactase will vary, though generally about 6,000 to 9,000 ALUs per meal is enough. But again, remember that the administration method of the enzymes matters as much as the amount of enzymes in a product itself, since if the enzymes actually can't come into contact with the lactose, they're not going to be effectively breaking it down. So this is actually one of the reasons why a lot of time, results with lactose targeting enzymes can be very mixed. It's more about this mode of administration. Alpha galactosidase, the next enzyme, is another FODMAP targeting enzyme that really helps break down galactans, or that GOS category of the FODMAPs. So GOS themselves kind of fall within this broader category of the oligosaccharides, or the O in the FODMAP family. These GOS are found in beans, cashews, pistachios, lentils, chickpeas, lots of other vegetables as well. The quote kind of gassy ones are very commonly high GOS. Here, it's usually about 300 to 400 GALU per meal that is a recommended dose, but also, in tandem with the correct mode of administration. Along with kind of the GOS category of FODMAPs, fructans are also part of that oligosaccharide family. So again, the O. Fructan itself is just a general term that includes a few different types of oligosaccharides, and these can have, different chain lengths, different structures, and actually different types of linkages between the individual carbohydrate units. So inulin is a very common, type of fructan made of long chains of fructose units, usually with a terminal glucose at the end. And inulin is, found in a lot of different plants, and it's also often, used in supplements to add a quote prebiotic benefit to them as well. On top of inulin, levain is another type of fructan. This has kind of a different type of linkage between those fructose units than inulin does. Other members of the quote fructan family include the fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, and these are shorter in chain length than inulin. And all these different types of fructans are found in, really common plants, and most fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains actually contain a mix of different types of fructans. So, what's interesting to know is that, genus, species, even seasonality and environmental conditions all play a role in influencing how much of each different type of fructan will be present in a particular plant. So, fructans are one of the most common FODMAP triggers among FODMAP sensitive folks. And, they're really highly prevalent in foods. Garlic, onion, leek, scallion, asparagus, wheat, whole grain bread, like all of these kind of pictures that I have here and so much more are all really high in fructans. And so fructan hydrolase is a broad spectrum enzyme that can target the full kind of spectrum of these different fructans. This is an enzyme that's found in FODMAP's formula. On top of that, inolinase is a kind of generic enzyme term that targets inulin, so it will target that one category of the fructans. Dosing recommendations for these enzymes will be based on each product. So as you're choosing an enzyme, review the research, like we said, on the product, just to learn how many grams of fructan or inulin the enzyme is able to break down with a single dose. Most enzymes will provide kind of a standard recommended dose based on typical amounts of FODMAPs in meals and based on common FODMAP tolerance levels themselves. When we get into kind of enzymes for fructose and polyols, things are a little more nuanced here. So fructose is a unique FODMAP because it causes issues when consumed in excess of glucose, since glucose actually aids in the absorption of fructose. On top of that, fructose tolerance thresholds also tend to be much higher than they are for fructans. So just for context, in those who are sensitive, it can take an additional 15 grams of fructose to trigger symptoms, while it can take only about 1 gram of fructan. So, if you are fructose sensitive, glucose isomerase, it's also called xylose isomerase, is the enzyme that would target fructose, but actually instead of breaking it down, it's really changing the structure of fructose, from a monosaccharide to another monosaccharide, just glucose, and glucose is actually more easily absorbed. So it's not breaking anything down, it's just changing the structure of one monosaccharide into another that's better tolerated. And so if you are using xylose isomerase, an effective dose is generally about 120 grams per 25 grams of fructose consumed. When we look at polyols, there's no enzyme yet on the market that can target polyols. So if you are sensitive to polyols, the best option is really just to limit your intake of polyols at this time. And then, when it comes to how to start using digestive enzymes with your meals, if you're FODMAP sensitive, there's kind of two high-level approaches. So the first would be at the end of the full low FODMAP diet approach. After identification of your FODMAP triggers in the elimination and reintroduction phase, so after steps 1 and 2 of the low FODMAP diet, digestive enzymes can be used with your known FODMAP triggers to now add back more options to your plate during this third personalization phase. You wouldn't want to use the enzymes during the earlier phases because that can make it hard to actually truly understand and learn your true trigger foods and the tolerance level that you have with each. So after you've developed kind of a clear picture on the FODMAPs that are triggering for you and in what amounts, then you can start using enzymes. Adding them earlier would actually kind of muddy the data, so to speak. So you always want to wait until the personalization phase actually to start using enzymes. Enzymes can also be used up front, before or without any dietary changes. So in this case, you would use the enzymes when you're knowingly eating any food that contains FODMAPs that are likely your triggers. So, in this scenario, common FODMAP foods that you might use the enzyme with, would be a lactose-containing dairy or milk, beans, maybe legumes or other kind of garlic and onion, even like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, so some of those GOS foods. But there's, of course, many, many more that you might want to use a enzyme with just to test this out. And so, once you do use the enzymes with that potentially triggering meal, you would assess your response after it. And if you don't experience the, symptoms that you might otherwise, this is a really good indication that there's a FODMAP sensitivity and that, the enzymes can actually help you tolerate those foods. And then kind of beyond that, there's always rare scenarios where, maybe you don't know the FODMAP content of a meal. Maybe you're at a party or traveling. Enzymes can be used a little bit more as a precaution. So again, remember that, enzymes are essentially just proteins. So if they don't have a FODMAP to target, they're just metabolized and excreted. They're not sticking around or circulating in the body. And so, while of course it's not ideal, we want to use a digestive enzyme when there is a FODMAP trigger to target. This is a harmless option in case you're worried about any potential FODMAP intake. And so just kind of to summarize how enzymes provide support in a few different ways, first, they enable better digestion of your trigger foods and help reduce this overall FODMAP stacking and, intake in general. So this allows for kind of more FODMAP stacking throughout the day or at a single meal. They also just support greater tolerance to FODMAPs, to support greater dietary flexibility and a more nutrient-rich diet overall. In particular, this can be really helpful just to add more fiber and especially prebiotic fiber to your diet. So while over-the-counter digestive enzymes are never going to be treatment for a condition itself, they can help you add more fiber and prebiotic fiber to your diet just to support a healthy microbiome. And, what we do know is that a high fiber diet is very preventative against many other GI conditions. And then, last but certainly not least, digestive enzymes can be really monumental in allowing just for more food freedom and helping open up social eating scenarios. So we all want to enjoy the many kind of communal and cultural aspects of food, which is essentially where enzymes shine the most, if you ask me. For anyone who's reluctant to reintroduce a trigger food that maybe you've been avoiding for a long time, enzymes can provide almost an extra boost of, say, confidence or encouragement to re-challenge and reassess your tolerance levels. What we know is that FODMAP sensitivities really change over time. And it's very important to always be constantly kind of learning how these tolerance levels vary and how they evolve so that you can have, long-term, the most diverse diet possible. And kind of in short, just to, share how, important enzymes can be in allowing for more food freedom and this ability to relax around food and enjoy FODMAP, containing meals again. Here's just a small taste of some of the many, high FODMAP meals that can often be tolerated and enjoyed with the help of digestive enzymes. And so to wrap up, I'll just underline how, the pathophysiology of functional GI disorders is incredibly complex. We always want to develop really a long-term kind of customized plan that helps you manage and control your symptoms with the least amount of dietary restriction possible so that, you can enjoy all the nutritional and social benefits just of a diverse diet. So I really hope that this helped you learn how digestive enzymes can be one tool in what is hopefully a really robust digestive health toolkit to manage any FODMAP intolerances. As always, it often takes many tools to fully keep symptoms under control, and digestive enzymes can be truly one powerful tool in that larger equation. And so to wrap up, I just want to thank you all for your time. Here's my contact information if you would like to reach out with any questions, and have a great day.